What's going on, Wolfpack Nation? Welcome to another edition, and we are so excited here to be talking about our NC State offense for the 2026 football season that's coming up here in just over 30 days here. It's crazy to say the least here that we're just over a month away here, Ethan, from getting this NC State 2026 football season started, man. And we're going to be talking a lot here today about breaking down each position here within the NC State offense and what to expect, who to watch out for, and what are the keys here to NC State offense having a very successful season here. So, Ethan, dude, I mean, it's crazy, man. The days are flying by here to game one, that's for sure.
They are. I feel like we have the same conversation every year about how fast it's going. Oh, can't believe it's football season already, and here we are again, right? So, man, CJ Bailey's already a junior. You know, it's just, man, where is the time going? So, yeah, but look, football season, best time of the year, right? I don't know about you. I enjoy college sports for 9 months out of the year. It's just every day. It's just thrown at you. So I kind of enjoy the 3-month break, which I guess at this point we're 2 months through, almost 2 months since baseball ended. So, ready to get the juices flowing again.
Yeah. So wanted to kind of start off with Ethan, kind of taking a look at last year's offense, because I truly do feel, I mean, especially since you have the same quarterback, that you definitely can maybe take a look at last year's team and really compare it to what does the offense need to do this year to improve? What do they need to focus on? One of the immediate things I felt like, Ethan, is that looking at the stats from last year they averaged just over 30 points a game, which two of the games that they played last year, they only scored 7 points, and that was versus Miami and Notre Dame. So I mean, if you take out those 7-point games, Ethan, the average jumps all the way up to 34.5 points per game. So I mean, the offense truly did have a real ceiling that I think really showed itself in the Georgia Tech matchup, specifically scoring 48 points. So I mean, just talking about the kind of the floor versus ceiling conversation of last year, what would you say attributed to, the success that you saw with those ceilings, but also to the struggles that you saw in those floors facing probably two very elite defenses in Miami and Notre Dame?
Yeah. Well, I do think for starters, right, if we're going to talk about 7 points against Notre Dame and Miami, we also have to mention 56 against Campbell, kind of on the other
Sure.
end of that. So, but you're right. Like they did explode offensively, 48 against Georgia Tech. You mentioned that, 42 against UNC, 34 against Wake Forest, who ended up being a really good defense. I don't know if people are kind of aware State played them early in the season. That ended up being a very good Wake Forest, particularly on the defensive side, and they won 9 games. You had 35 against Virginia, who obviously wasn't great defensively, but did play for the ACC title. So yeah, I think the ceiling was there, and I think you checked a lot of boxes. There was a lot of talent on the field. Now I do think they were a little young, and that's why I was really bullish on the potential of keeping this core group offensively together, which didn't necessarily happen. And so now for me, the question is how does that change things? But yeah, I
Mhm.
thought NC State went into a lot of games last year where they had the talent at wide receiver, at running back, at tight end, at those skill positions to, just out talent other teams, which we haven't necessarily seen State do that at those particular positions. If they have, a lot of times it's been, front seven, offensive line, things like that.
Mhm.
And so I think those guys were a big part of it. Obviously, Bailey, like there's a lot of potential NFL guys that were on that offense last year, just young. And I think that attributes to some of the ups and the downs, some of the games where you had more turnovers, and the inconsistencies. But again, as you said, the ceiling was very high.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, though, too, as well, I think that last year's offense, you saw, I think, finally Coach Doeren come out of his usual rely on the defense shell, particularly, I think it was against UVA, where we went for a really, let's call it what it was, ballsy fourth down conversion with Will Wilson and converted. And I think honestly, Ethan, that really unlocked a whole new strategy for the rest of the season, where we ended up only having 9 field goal attempts last season, Ethan. I mean, I don't know if you would have, and maybe I should have asked you how many field goal attempts do you think that we attempted last season? But we only attempted 9, which is crazy compared to most, to where it's easily in the higher teens, if not 20s, in terms of a number of field goal attempts in a whole season. So, do you think, Ethan, that you see more of that this season in terms of a more aggressive style, fourth and two or less? You're going for it probably 90% of the time with Will
Yeah.
Wilson back there.
I do think Dave Doeren deserves a lot of credit for that. I think certainly that's been a complaint. They haven't been aggressive enough on fourth downs. Too reliant on field goals, kind of as you said. Um, and so I think the willingness to adjust there, you know, it took longer than you would have liked, but ultimately you got there eventually, and I think you benefited from that last year. So I think Doran deserves a lot of credit for that. And yeah, absolutely. I think uh, Will Wilson, yeah, like that. That's why he's there. And NC State kept him around. They paid him very handsomely. I shouldn't say very handsomely, but for a backup quarterback, he was paid very handsomely, right? Who you don't expect to throw the ball once this year, you know. Yeah, you have to be really really good in those situations. You have to be good on the margins, with where this program is at. And so again, Dorn deserves a lot of credit for that. I think there's an element of like knowing, hey, we need to be better offensive. We need to be better on the offensive side of the ball and less reliant on our defense as we have been in past years. I've always, people always say, hey, it's trusting the defense. And I've always pushed back on that. I don't think punting on 4th and 1 from the 37 or 38, whatever, is trusting the defense. I think that's not trusting your defense. If you trust your defense, you feel like if you turn the ball over on downs, they can get it right back for you.
I'd
Whereas
agree. Yeah.
trusting, like, if you don't need to try and pin them inside the 5 or the 10. That's what you do with a defense that you don't trust, where you want to make the team
Hmm.
go 90 yards to score. So I thought that was great. And you look at State had a Vineset was 5 for 6 on field goals. Konashinsky, I think that's how you pronounce it, kicked a couple, right? But I don't think it really had anything to do with the kickers, which is something we've seen in the past where, when you had Kyle Bambard, yeah, State was more aggressive on fourth down, right? And then years where they had better kickers, they were less aggressive on fourth downs. Again, for me, not every field goal is the same, but a lot of field goals are, to me, I view them as -4 instead of +3.
Yeah.
And so I think seeing that adjustment from State last year, yeah, you expect that to go even further with the success rate that Will Wilson had last year. I think it was 75-80%, somewhere in that range on his on the plays that he ran.
Mhm. Yeah, no, well, and talking about too as well. I mean, like, I want to kind of transition now, talking specifically about the quarterback side with CJ Bailey here, and kind of recap. So last season, played all 13 games, had a 68.77% completion percentage, threw for just over 3,100 yards last season, 238.85 per game, 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 150.71 passer rating, and had 211 yards rushing on 43 carries. But one thing I want to talk about, you think, as we talked about it on our live show this week here, was talking about his development over the last couple of years since he came to NC State as a true freshman. And one of the things that really stood out to me is, and because I know that they were talking about this at the AC kickoff in terms of one of the big things that really sold CJ on returning, is truly the fact that Coach Doran, at an early stage when everybody was coming to his school to see Jeremiah Smith, was more dead set on the quarterback and CJ and saying, that's a guy that I can develop into to an all ACC, all American talent. And especially you look at CJ's weight when he came to campus, he was 170. Now he's in the 220s range in terms of weight here. So I think you actually saw a little bit of that play into his game last year, a little bit more willingness to be smart in terms of when he decides to take off with the ball. Um, and I think you're seeing that now too with his large frame. And I don't know, like, I don't think he's necessarily gonna be lowering their shoulder on anybody, but I think that'll definitely help him be more durable, which I think for CJ is that's gotta be priority number one, is gotta stay healthy. I know it's something which we even said in the live show, being like, you can't factor in injuries because you never know, unfortunately, when and if an injury is ever going to happen. But definitely building a larger frame that's more capable and able of taking hits, small or big as they may, and being able to stay in the game is a huge benefit towards that.
Yeah. Well, last year was the first year since 2021 that State had stability at the quarterback position, where they weren't going through multiple. Obviously, they played Wilson, but we know the circumstances there. So I'm with you. Like quarterback health, you're right, is such a big deal. And I thought like if you told me that CJ Bailey would be fully healthy last year, I probably would have thought they'd win more than 8. But again, you look at the schedule, it ended up being tougher than expected. Certainly that had something to do with it. Um, but you're right. Like taking care of his body, the situations that you're going to be putting Will Wilson in, the physicality with which he plays with. Yeah, you do have to stay healthy there. And again, we've seen a number of quarterback injuries. NC State has seen more than their fair share, I would say, of quarterback injuries over the last 5 years, 6 years. Going back to really Ryan Finley. Devin Leary had what, 2 season-ending injuries, and
Yeah.
um, yeah. So and then obviously some underperformance since then as well. But yeah, I definitely think that's a big part of it. You
Yeah.
need the continuity. You need the continuity. I think that's is kind of an underrated part, especially in this era. I think that's always been a big deal at the college level, where there's constant turnover at all times. But now the turnover has gone to a whole nother level, right? And so being healthy, staying healthy, keeping Bailey on the field, yeah, uh, NC State needs it this year.
Yeah. Now, one because I want to kind of talk about because again, we could spend a whole episode talking about CJ Bailey because there's no doubt he's the poster child for this team as much the starting QB is for most any college football team out there. But one thing I just want to kind of summarize really kind of one big X factor. What is the one thing that if CJ can improve this area, then we're going to be set in to have a really successful season on the offensive side of the ball. For me, it's getting getting more downfield with throws. Last season he averaged 7.73 yards per attempt. And we talked about this even too as well again on the live show, how it seemed like we were force feeding at times the ball to Joe Lee, which is more of your, 8 to 12 yards downfield throws. But being that you do have some speed in Victor Snow, and even Keenan, who's shown some 4-4 ability. Duke Scott even potentially with some wheel routes, you name it. And especially being the fact that CJ is now going to be solidified as a threat running the ball, with and having a little bit more sophisticated offense, maybe doing a little bit more from a run pass option perspective, trying to get those linebackers, safeties to bite here. Why not beat them downfield a little bit more this season? That's really kind of the biggest thing for me is really stretching the field, and which at the end of the day would really just help you when it comes to helping Duke Scott, helping the other Paler running options, even CJ with being able to run the ball when asked upon.
Mhm. Well, you took mine. That was gonna be yeah, that was my answer as well, and I thought to me that was one of the biggest gripes. I thought with the caliber of receiver that NC State had last year, and I know not everybody liked Noah Rogers as much as I did. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I think he got hurt at Alabama, but Terrell Anderson too, right? The caliber of years. I think Terrell Anderson, like that's a guy who could be an NFL star. Um, I thought Bailey and State didn't capitalize enough, particularly down the field. You could throw Wesley Grimes in there. Um, they didn't capitalize on those guys' downfield talent enough last year. And so that was my original answer. So I like your answer. I will audible and go to taking care of the ball. Like it sounds simple. It sounds simple, right? But states Bailey had three interceptions against Duke. I believe he had a fumble in that game as well. You lose that game. Three interceptions against Notre Dame. Obviously not competitive there. Miami, two interceptions in that game. He had one interception against ECU. You know, that was a game State only won 24-17. So when he took care of the ball, State was good, right? They went 8-2, 7-2 if you want to take the ECU game out. And the losses were a game where they scored 21 against Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh, where State scored 34 points in that game.
Mm,
That was something we saw in year one as well, right? Bailey,
mhm.
like when CJ Bailey has taken care of the ball, they've won games. And I point to, again, we talked about like the quarterback turnover the last 3 years. Well, the common theme is State has consistently won those turnover battles. They've found guys, they haven't been very good, but they haven't turned the ball over. When you look at like Jack Chambers, and I wouldn't throw MJ Morris in there, but I guess it was during that time. Brennan Armstrong, right? And that was one of the reasons I really like Grayson McCall. Ben Finley had a few starts. Those guys, they weren't very good. They're not as good as CJ Bailey, not even close. But State regularly won those turnover battles. And when you look at the first 2 years with CJ Bailey, the games they've lost the turnover battle. And
Yeah.
so, you know, if State wants to put together a 9-3 or a 10-2 type of season, Bailey's going to have to get the turnovers under control. You can't win a game turning the ball over 3 or 4 times, and that's happened too often with CJ Bailey.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, as simple as it is, I think we're really kind of laying up the most obvious, but also to the, one that's really simple to do. Just take care of the football.
Well, it's
Don't be
easier said than
overly
done.
aggressive. Easier,
It's
it's
easier,
easier said than done,
and
yes, but at the end
and
of the day, it's go ahead.
not all the turnovers are on the quarterback, right? Like
Correct.
they could be deflected. It could be an offensive lineman being beat. It could be a receiver running the wrong way. You
Right.
know, but obviously, you know, it's a team sport, and that's why you still look at the turnover battle as a whole, right? And not just, well, how many interceptions did you throw? Because everything else factors in too.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's more than fair here for sure. Now, the one thing though, which I think we both can agree on here, Ethan, is that seeing an interception happen in person, or God forbid, a quarterback go down, even if it's nothing serious, and hearing Carter Finley Stadium just get really really quiet all of a sudden, it definitely can cause me to be a little bit nervous, and even ask for probably potentially some CPR too as well, to get to get me back into the game here for sure. And if you have not gotten any kind of CPR certification before, you gotta check out our amazing sponsor, Alpha Wolf CPR Trainings first, who is able to offer CPR trainings for your business, school, church, team, or organization. And the Alpha Wolf CPR trainings makes it easy for you by bringing the training directly to you, offering adult pediatric certifications, and with successful completion, participants actually receive an official Red Cross, American Red Cross certification, valid for 2 years, and meeting OSHA standards. It's convenient, it's professional, it's tailored to your schedule. So, Alpha Wolf CPR trainings, make sure to reach out to them, as they will always make sure that you stay prepared when every second matters. So, to learn more and schedule your class today, visit alphawolfcpr.square.site today. So, Ethan, I want to jump into here though the running backs, which I'm running back, y'all. Gotta pull out the quote whenever possible here. But yeah, so I mean the head guy itself, Duke Scott. The big question feel like I want to ask you, Ethan, is there's a lot of talks around Duke Scott being a workhorse running back for this upcoming season. And we definitely have put a lot of chips into the Duke Scott basket here, letting Hollywood Smothers move on, but also too, and rightfully so though too, because he has shown a lot of promise. Again, 4.3, 4.4 speed. He's a tank of a human being. Listed as one of the beasts of college football for this upcoming season, nationally. And again, like made a lot of huge plays for us last year, specifically against Georgia Tech, where he ran for all over Georgia Tech that night. But obviously, there is two, I think, potential options behind him, and Jonathan Paylor, again, a former top 100 recruit in his class 2 years ago. coming back from an ACL injury, and then Davion from UNC, who's a rising junior, played with CJ Bailey in high school. So, do you truly think that Duke Scott's going to be a 80% of the touch running back this season?
Well, I think 80 is high, but yeah, I do think he's going to be the guy for NC State. I I expect him to have a big year. I do wonder if maybe people are getting carried away a little bit. Obviously, we know Will Wilson will be very involved in the running game, right? Um, but yeah, I expect him to have a big year. I'm not as bullet like I don't really have major expectations for Jonathan Taylor. I know that's a guy you're high on, and I think athletically the ability is there. I just kind of wonder, like, it's been 2 years now since he played, you know,
Yeah.
and so I just kind of wonder about the impact there. And Davion Gauss, I think he's fine. He's fine as a backup, but I don't really. I don't think he's going to come in and take Duke Scott's job or anything like that. Um, but yeah, it's a lot on Duke Scott. I think he's probably ready for it. And I was a proponent of NC State letting Hollywood Smothers walk. I was. Now I like my reasoning is probably different from other people. I thought, okay, if you're gonna get Jaden Scott, like I'm not expecting Duke Scott to be as good as Hollywood Smothers. But I think if you can get him for 70, if you can get 70 to 80% of the production and talent, probably not talent, but I think Smothers is very talented, and do that for 20 to 30% of the cost, to me, that's where it makes sense. I'm not expecting Scott to be as good or as impactful as Hollywood Smothers is. Now, I think Scott's going in a similar situation where Smothers is, where it was like, all right, you have this guy that you feel good about, but what's behind him, you don't really know.
Mhm.
Um, and so I do think that sets up Scott for a big year where it's going to be, hey, we're going to give you as many carries as you can handle. Like this is
Yeah.
not going to be a couple years ago. It was like a three-headed monster that just you never really figured it out. Like I don't think it's that sort of thing, but yeah, I expect him to have a big year. And yeah, potential 1,000-yard rusher. I think.
Well, I mean, and that was really going to be my next big question here, Ethan, was around. And Greg's come out and planted his flag and saying that Duke is going to be that guy, the first 1,000-yard rusher that we've had since Reggie Gillespie did in 2018 here. And so, what are the odds of him achieving it? Which I feel like from what you're saying, odds I feel like are pretty high. Again, I mean, he ran for over 200 yards versus Georgia Tech, highlighted by a 60-yard rushing touchdown. And again, we're talking potentially 13 games here. So, you're not necessarily saying, okay, you go out, you average 70, 80 yards, rushing per game, which is not, again, easier said than done. You said that before. I completely agree with that too. But I think that with what this offense will give you, hopefully throwing the ball, like I said during the quarterback side, it should open up a lot in terms of offering rushing lanes and opportunities for Duke to go get, 5, 6 yards a carry kind of deal. And being with his frame, being able to get yards post contact, I think will be huge for him too as well. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the offensive line here in a minute, but I think that's going to be a big proponent too as well. Is can Coach 2J's offensive line, especially unfortunately losing one backup offensive tackle in particular here, but can those things come together and get Duke Scott to 1,000-yard rushing line for the first time since 2018 is going to be a huge storyline if Duke is able to make that happen.
Yeah, well, to me, the thing with those is always, can you stay healthy, right? And that was the problem with it wasn't the problem with Smothers, but that was why he came up short, right?
Mhm.
He had 160 carries in 11 games, which I thought he had missed another game, but I guess not. And that's 14 and a half carries a game. That's a lot. Like that is a pretty solid number. Smothers was involved quite a bit in the passing game. I think Jaden Scott, Duke Scott, I keep calling him Jaden. Same guy, right? Um, I,
Yeah, same
I
guy.
I do think that will. um, you know, impact things. And again, like, are you trying to balance things out? State does have, you know, this year for what it's worth, they do have two kind of gimme games with App State and Richmond. Last year they really only had one. So, you know, do you keep like Smothers had 3 carries against Campbell, right? That allowed him to keep his workload down for the rest of the year. And I thought they asked a
Yep.
lot of Smothers, and I thought he kind of slowed down by the end of the year. Right? Are you going to do the same thing with Scott? Do you feel like, you know, he's a bigger body so he can handle it more? He really had 3 games, right? Other than that, he was a backup. He did not run for more than 35 yards um, in any game. Well, let me rephrase this differently. He only had 3 games where he ran for more than 35 yards. Other than that, he was just kind of a, you know, relegated to backup duty.
Yeah.
And it was the Campbell game, obviously, where it was out of hand very early. Then it was the Georgia Tech game, which we know Smothers missed, and Memphis, which he missed again. And that to me, the Georgia Tech game did a lot of heavy lifting for Scott, because if you look at what he did against Memphis, it was 19 for 94, 4.9 yards per carry. Like, that's good. It's good, but it's not like it's not going to blow you. I mean, Smothers was over 6 yards per carry, right? And so I think he'll be in line for a big year, but like he does have to stay healthy. And State was very, very healthy at the running back position last year. I think people kind of underestimate, you know, the likelihood of injuries at that spot. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
he's in line for a big year. I do, but there's other pieces of it too. There's Will Wilson, there's injuries, there's you know, what's behind him, what's not behind him. So to me, a lot of different moving pieces there, but um, yeah, I again flashed 7. He had 7 games where he was under 4 yards per carry. But again, it was such a small sample size. Like, it's hard to, like, it's 3, 4, 5, 7 carries a game. Like, how much stock do you really put into that?
Yeah. Now, before I kind of write anybody off though too as well, I mean, is there any other names that we should keep an eye out for besides Duke, Davion, and Taylor? Do you think those are really going to be only 3 guys that really do anything from a running back perspective this season?
Um, I think State was very fortunate last year to be as healthy as they were. And I think their coaching staff deserves a lot of credit for that. I thought they managed that position very, very well. I was very upfront about that going into the year. I did not think they would make it through with just 2 running backs. I didn't think it would be possible to make it through a season with just two. And
Yeah.
you know, now as you look at the setup now, I know you're throwing Paler in there. I don't have him in there. I think it's just Scott and Gauss right now. Um, so my answer would be no. Like, my answer would be no. You're going to need a third running back. Um, you know, at different parts of the season.
Yep.
You know, could it be Paler? Sure. Could it be, um, you know, Noah Moss is an incoming freshman. Um, RJ Boyd, I believe, had a medical situation. I want to make sure I have that one right, but I believe RJ Boyd is who had cancer and so enrolled a year late. Then you also have RJ. No, I'm sorry, Dylan McCoy. Those guys are all freshmen. You have Isaiah Jones, who's a local kid. DeAndre Desanor is a sophomore. Like, maybe it's Desanor. Like, he's probably the guy I would have circled. He was pretty highly regarded when State landed him a couple years ago. But to me, they're gonna need one of those guys. I really think
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, but again, I mean, it's going to be spearheaded by Duke Scott, and rightfully so. Excited to see what Duke can do here this season. Now, I do want to go ahead and jump though to wide receivers because now we're going to get deep into more of the positions that everybody's really talking about here. So,
Mhm.
starting off with receiver side, I think the big question is, and we talked about it during the live show, but who is CJ's guy? Like, you know, I think that the obvious answer seems to be JoJo Trader, but I think that's more of what okay, like that's just more of an A plus B equals C. They played together in high school, like, you know, so there's that chemistry there already. JoJo's you know, former four-star recruit, so a very, very talented wide receiver too as well. Can do a lot of great things. So sure, he makes sense to be a potential for the guy. But I kind of also too look at Keenan Jackson saying, well, CJ's played with Keenan for the last 2 seasons, and they saw had a lot of success together. So I think Keenan also too is a guy that potentially fits the mold of being quote unquote CJ's guy this year. Um, but so I kind of a two-fold question again, Ethan. But do you feel like there is going to be a guy this year that will break out? Or and also too, if there is, who would you pinpoint as your prediction of who that guy will be?
You know, Layton, the Noah Rogers experience really hurt me. It hurt me.
It
And I
did.
would throw Terrell Anderson in there too. To me, both of those guys. And Terrell, like obviously Terrell was more had more on field production than Noah did. I thought those two guys were very, very good. I thought the way they got rotated in and out, not throwing the ball as much as they did, I couldn't as much as I thought they should. I'm sure they thought they should, right? They're receivers. I like when's the last time State had a go-to receiver? Is it Emeka Emezi? It's been if so, it's been 5 years.
Thayer Thomas. I mean,
Well, but he was the same time as Emezi.
yeah, true. And Carter, Devin Carter too. So
Well,
yeah.
no, Devin Carter. I don't. Devin Carter is not in that category. I don't think.
No, yeah,
So
no, I agree. Go. Yeah.
I don't think I don't think there's going to be a standout guy. I think they did. I don't like the approach myself if I were handling the football team, but with the way they handle with the way NC State handles the football team, I do kind of like it. They rotate a bunch of guys, right? We're not going all in on one receiver. It's just not going to happen. So, they brought in different guys. They brought in Davion Dozier. They brought in Tyron Warren, Victor Snow. They brought in different pieces who, to me, none of them JoJo Trader has the most upside, and he's the biggest name. But again, after seeing what happened with Rodgers and Anderson, I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, JoJo Trader's gonna, put it all together and,
Yeah.
be 1,000-yard guy and all that stuff." I just don't buy it. Like, I think they value blocking too much with receivers. So I think Keenan Jackson's a great pick. I think I believe his snap share has been, I don't know if it was highest on the team, but it was way up there. Um, Certainly last year, and even as a freshman, he played a ton. So I think Keenan Jackson's a good pick. Again, will the number of catches be there? I also think this is a intriguing group of freshmen. Amiri Acker, Tyreek Copper, and Aiden Smalls. I think those are three guys. Again, will all three of those guys help you this year? No. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them did, and I would not be surprised if those guys really blew up kind of down the road. I think athletically, they are excellent. I don't want to say they jump off the page, but they're excellent. And so again, like what does that look like this year? To me, if I had to label label one for this year, probably would be Copper. Smalls played some quarterback in high school, so kind of transitioning to a new position, but I can't pick one. I can't pick one. I don't think we've seen State take that approach. Do I think JoJo Trader will be their most talented receiver? Yes. Who's going to have the most yards? Mm, I I probably go Jackson.
Wow.
Probably would.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, again, and I think the other big piece too, as well. I want to kind of finish this wide receiver point on here, is the fact that one stat that I saw that really stood out to me was that 145 of the 264 first downs that NC had last season were through the air. Which you combine that too with the fact that there is a lot of chips in on CJ Bailey having a great season, is the fact that you're going to have now again, like there's going to be a lot of emphasis on CJ to make the receivers look good, but there's still going to be a lot of expectation on the receivers to do their job. Like you said, block when they're asked to, block effectively,
That was
run the
sarcasm.
route properly, catch the ball, you name it. Like, still do their job. And so the fact that the guys that we mentioned, JoJo Trader is a junior, Dozier, senior, Keenan Jackson, junior, Tyron Warren, senior, Victor Snow, fifth year senior. So a lot of experience there, a lot of seniority there, but you also still have the potentials of upside guys in those three freshmen that you had mentioned, where if they can pop off, like a Teddy Hoffman last year, like a Kevin Concepcion 3 years ago, whatever it may be, then great. Then, you're like, that's awesome to have. But you still have a pretty solid, experienced group of wide receivers there in that room to choose from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strength in numbers thing, and again, with the way State handles it, you feel like that's probably the right approach to roster building. And so,
Mhm.
I don't know that there's one guy here who they paid a ton of money to, and I think the guys that went out that left, they probably did need a ton of money, but with the way State handles them, I can kind of understand saying we're not gonna pay Terrell Anderson that amount of money. We're not gonna pay Noah Rogers that amount of money just
Mhm.
because it doesn't rationalize it. So the use doesn't
Right.
rationalize it. So I think from that perspective, it makes sense. But I also think those were guys that, as you said, really helped CJ Bailey out. Now, can these guys do it? I think you're not as talented at the wide receiver position. Does that mean you won't be as good or won't be as productive? No, but you're just gonna have to get there in a different way.
Right. No, I agree there. So I do want to switch though to Ethan. I feel like the position that kind of got, for lack of a better term, punted on in a way this offseason, and you may disagree, but the tight ends. You know, looking at the roster here, you're talking about Preston Douglas, who's a sophomore, was recruited out of high school by NC State. Gus Ritchie, former four-star tight end, who I'm really excited about in terms of, can he be a guy that breaks out here, but he's still sophomore. And then, you look down the list here, there's only two upperclassmen here, and one's Ian Flint and the other is Hunter Province here. But I know when all the transfer portal stuff was going on, there was a transfer tight end from, I believe it was New Mexico State, that NC State was looking at, that ended up not picking NC State. And so do you feel like, Ethan, that once that option at New Mexico State went south, they just said, "All right, let's transition our looks to maybe getting some more wide receiver depth that we're more excited about, rather than just settling on a guy at the tight end spot."
Yeah, I remember who you're talking about. I don't remember the name, but that was a relatively, big name. I don't remember where he ended up, but I I don't know. I think I really like the way that Gavin Locklear has recruited this room. He's very, very aggressive, wants to take as many guys as possible. I don't know who says, "Hey, we're gonna have this number of this position on the team, like 8 tight ends or 12 receivers or 60." I don't know who sets that, but it feels like Gavin Locklear is bringing in 4 guys every offseason. And so I think I don't know how aggressive State really needed to be in the portal. You mentioned Provience coming from Montana State. I think he fits. He's exactly the type of blocking tight end that Cody Hardy was last year. Um, I think he's going to be excellent in that role. How impactful will he be in the passing game? Probably not very, but that's fine. I think Hardy had like 7 for 87 last year. So I think you kind of expect the same sort of impact from him. But other than that, I think you have options. I think State really, really likes Preston Douglas. I do. That is a guy who played last year, which is not easy to do as a freshman, particularly when you look at like they had 3 tight ends who were all seniors, who were all good. Jolie, Cody Hardy, and Dante Daniels. Again, Preston Douglas wasn't necessarily getting snaps over them, but State made a concerted effort to get him on the field. I think
Yep.
Ian Flint is the guy that they like. And then there's a couple of freshmen too, and I believe it's Stephen Brown who has a ton of upside, kind of like a hybrid receiver tight end type of guy. And then they brought in Vanderplug from Oregon, who's you know checks all the recruiting boxes. So to me, there's a really really nice mix. There's not a proven Justin Jolie, proven okay, this guy's going to catch 6 touchdowns, 400 yards for us, but
Sure.
to me, there's a number of options here, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see this group go 4 or 5 deep over the course of the season.
Yeah. Well, and you didn't necessarily give too much in here, but I mean, again, Gus Ritchie, a guy that was recruited to NC State as a four-star guy, a guy that we flipped from UNC to NC State in a chef's kiss fashion here for sure. Do you really do think that it's going to be probably Preston Douglas's highlighted position to lose?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. At the receiving position, the receiving portion of the tight end spot, yes. The blocking, I think it's Providence. Again, kind of same thing with Richie. Like my expectations aren't super high with him. At least right now, he's still young. I just wonder about the body type. He's listed on the official website at 6'2", 235. That just feels small to me. And I know, out of high school, he was recruited by a number of teams as a defender. And so I just kind of
Yeah,
wonder, like, is he playing the right position? Like, should he be playing defense? I think he wants to play tight end, but defensively, like, should he be on the other side of the ball?
yeah,
I just kinda wonder if he's gotten recruited over, to be honest, and we'll
yeah,
see. Like, that's not to say again, I really like the way they've recruited. You mentioned it, he was a big name out of high school, didn't play last year, which again, I don't think that means anything with as good as that group was, but Preston Douglas did play, And so, yeah, I don't know where you would see Richie this year again. I think Provience and again, if he's a blocking tight end, maybe that's your answer. Maybe he's, the heir apparent to Providence, but Providence still has 2
yeah,
years left now with the 5 for 5.
yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So we'll see how this tight end position runs out here. But again, I think the nice thing is that you have options where you trust in Gavin Locklear and the amazing job he's done so far to continue and see if you can get some production out of these guys. But I don't think you are necessarily putting a lot of chips in the basket of hoping of like we really need this, somebody from this tight end group to break out. Like, I think that just if you have a tight end spot that does their job, that doesn't beat you, that does, I guess offer a threat to the defensive side, for on the opponent side, then that's at the end of the day what you're asking for from this tight end spot. Now, like you said, if Preston Douglas can break out as much as this coaching staff loves him, then just like we talked about with the freshman on the wide receiver side, awesome, cherry on top, love it. Let's go with it. So, but to wrap it up though, here, Ethan, the offensive line, who Coach Doeren said in his 14 years NC State is the deepest offensive line that he's ever had, which says a lot for sure. Now obviously, again, we already mentioned to it because no clue at all decided that Jai'Lun Hampton is not going to be eligible this season, which whatever. But still, though, you still do have two All ACC offensive linemen returning in Spikes and Teague Anderson too as well. So kind of talk to me about what is do you feel like that the starting lineup is gonna be pretty solidified, or do you think that Coach 2J, besides those 2 guys, you may see some switching of a couple of positions through the first 3, 4 games?
Well, we saw a lot of switching last year, right? A lot of rotating, which you generally don't see on the offensive line. I think you like to kind of have your 5 and stick with it. And then of course you're going to have injuries. I think mm, I think you're going to see left to right. I think it's going to be McCrimmon, and I don't have the guards straight on which side of the ball they'll be on, so I might have those mixed up.
Yeah,
McCrimmon left tackle, Stoles, we'll just put him at left guard, and I
okay.
think I'm pronouncing that right. I am
Yeah,
keeping an eye on his health. He battled injuries last year. I don't know. Like I just kind of am nervous about that with him.
yep,
Um, and then center, I believe, is Daniel Cruz right now. And I actually think that the other guard spot, it could go a number of different ways. Cayman Smith's in the mix, Rico Jackson.
mhm.
I wonder if it's not going to be Yusef Mugerbil.
I was
Um,
literally about to mention Youssef, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
I would not be surprised to see him have that spot out of the gate. But again, we saw a bunch of different guards early on last season, and then right tackle Teague Anderson. So yeah, you mentioned the depth. But yeah, I think you feel good. You feel good about Anderson. You feel great about Anderson. I think you feel really good about um, McCrimmon at the other tackle. You feel good about Souls if he's healthy. And again, I think Daniel Cruz. Like, to me, if I'm reading between the tea leaves here, like, okay, Souls was likely recruit he's an interior offensive lineman, probably should be a center, wants to be a center. So, if you're telling me you brought somebody else in who is now at center over Spike Souls, I'm gonna guess that that guy is you feel pretty good about him. So, and then it just kinda comes down to, again, the other spot. Kamen Smith is actually listed as a offensive tackle,
Mhm.
um, on the website. I don't know how much stock to put into that, but,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I do think, now that you run down it, like Jai'Lun Hampton, obviously you mentioned was ruled ineligible, like, you'd probably like to have him out there, but again, if Anderson and McCrimmon stay healthy and he's a tackle only, there's not really any snaps for him there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, but I mean, again, I think that anytime you get a transfer in from Texas, that's, always something that you're feeling pretty good. Same thing with my guy. Anytime you can get a transfer cornerback from Georgia, you're feeling
Mhm.
pretty optimistic about what
Yeah.
he could potentially do too as well. So shout out to my guy there. But yeah, I mean, so again, like Daniel Cruz, I think it's a great option in terms of from a starting position. But the very least, again, like Dorn talked about, adding depth. I mean, you're talking. I mean, you're hopefully going to have 8, 9 guys that Coach 2J is going to go into the season where any one of them, if they need to see the field, that you're not necessarily overly concerned from a coaching perspective, which will be a huge bump up from I feel like years past where I feel like that you really had that one depth guy, and then if it was beyond that, then you were really watch out QB, keep your
Yeah.
eyes peeled kind of deal.
Yeah. Well, again, without Hampton, that does take one of your guys away. We
Yeah.
mentioned if Mugar Bill is the other guard with Souls, Rico Jackson, we talked about him, and Kamen
Mhm.
Smith. Like, those are two older guys. So I think you're probably comfortable putting out there in a backup type of role. TK Whitsitt was a highly regarded freshman. Is he going to be ready to go in year two? Again, we've heard good things about the depth, and I mentioned it with Locklear. I really like the way Tuje recruits as well, but just the persistence in bringing guys in. But I do think, like, again, if Spike Souls has to miss any time, now all of a sudden, like, man, now you're
Mhm.
now you're thin, and that's again before any other injuries.
Right.
So is Trent Mitchell? He's in year three. Is he able to play for you? I don't know. So I think you feel good about the depth right now. Like, there are 7 guys, but at the same time, like, man, you'd really like to have Hampton. When it first happened with Hampton, I was like, okay, obviously sucks for him. But man, now that I'm looking at this offensive line, and it's weird
Could
because
have
you've
really
heard
used
that,
them.
like, one of the things could have really used him. It's weird because you feel good about, okay, that you've heard the depth on the offensive line is in a good spot. But then I'm kind of going down these names and I'm like, man, how many of these guys have played? And you kind of run out of names quickly.
Sure.
Um, so I don't know. Like, to me, Hampton, talking through it now, feels like a bigger loss than I originally had thought.
Yeah. No, very true. And so I think really the big thing, really key for me for this, keeping Spike healthy. Again, just because I mean, again, he's a guy going into the season that's put as a second, third team All ACC. He is a really, really great talent. And I think especially this year, having a guy with that ceiling is going to be so so key. But also too, I think another big X factor piece though too as well is just the same situation I just said for the wide receiver side. You see that with the offensive line too as well. I mean, pretty much every single guy that we've talked about except for Spike, who's a sophomore, is a junior or higher, as an upperclassman. So, guys that have been around college football and have, you know, had a lot of practices, even if they haven't necessarily seen a lot of game time. So that's always a positive. Now, again, you wish that you had a lot more experience there from a game time perspective, but you know, it's always better to say, well, I have a guy who's not really experienced, but he's been around college football rather than a guy who's a freshman or sophomore. And sure, because he's so young, he hasn't had a lot of playing time, but he also hasn't really been around college football for that long either. So it's like, well, I'd rather at least have the guy who's been around, but necessarily hasn't seen as much time and has been in in a college football locker room and weight room and nutrition, etc. I'd rather put more stock into a guy like that. So feel good at the very least that you do have a very older, I guess not necessarily experienced, older offensive line room to pair with that older wide receiver room too as well on the offensive side. So, any other big, keys that you feel like for the offense this season, Ethan, that you want to highlight that we didn't discuss already?
No, I think State's gone all in on CJ Bailey, and I hate to
Yep.
be like, yeah, it's 11 guys out there. I get it, but I, this is it. Like State's gone all in on him,
Hmm.
for better or for worse. And I
Yep.
mentioned it. I definitely have my concerns, but again, it's not to say it can't work or it won't work. So it's it's his show. It's his show. You're ready for him to take the leap as an upperclassman. He's a potential draft guy now entering year 3.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot is on his plate, and you need him to put things together. And the other part of it is, this was kind of my thing last year. I know a lot of people had a lot of complaints about the defense. I didn't expect the defense to carry the team. I expected the offense to carry the team. So I hold them to a higher standard. Kind of the same thing here. Like I'm expecting the offense to carry the team. And so, I at least for me, they're going to be held to a little bit of a higher standard this year.
Yeah. Now we'll definitely though talk about the defensive side. So I definitely still think there is a great potential of the defense stepping up and definitely surpassing what you saw on the defensive side last year, even though you lost a couple of key pieces on the defensive side and Sebastian Harsh and Caden Fordham too as well, and Sion Salone, etc. So, but we'll talk about that next week. Again, preview the in-state defense next week. Looking forward to it. If you haven't already from our side, though, Wolfpack Nation, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's free to do. It really helps support the channel. And to make sure you do not miss out whenever we release that defensive preview, too, as well. Plus, any other content that we put out there. And secondly, too, as well, if you enjoyed this conversation, do us a big favor. Hit that like button, too, as well. If either of those buttons lit up for you, that means you haven't hit them yet. Make sure to go and smash the subscribe and like buttons for us right now. If you're listening to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, do us a big favor, leave us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate that too as well. It really helps support the channel a ton. Make sure also to give us a follow, Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and sorry, did I say them all? TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Yep, that's it. Cool. Thank you. Was going through them all in my head here. Make sure to give us a follow on all of our social media too
MySpace.
as well. Yeah, MySpace. Yeah, exactly. But with that being said, Wolfpack Nation, we appreciate y'all. We will see y'all soon. And as always, go pack, y'all.